Welcome to the Magdalene Codes. I'm your host, Valeria Marie Tinini. And in part of the Magdalene Codes, there is a universal law, the law of truth. Our guest today is a loyal contributor to these truth codes that Magdalene herself was revealing to us in that carnation, with her ancient wisdom from mystery schools and the celestial downloads. Prepare yourself as our guest William Henry presents us the codes of the Merkabah and Mary's oils. She created more than just perfumery. Everyone, we are with William Henry on the Magdalene Codes podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Val. So glad to be here. Really appreciate the invitation to come chat with you today and everybody, of course.
Thank you. I'm so excited about this discussion that we're having today because you have new findings with you and your wife that you've discovered in this process of, I'm assuming that you, in the process of going to Egypt.
Yes. Well, I've been on the Magdalene Trail. I first kind of hit the trail in 1982, which was a long time ago, and then really realized that the Magdalene mysteries were really core to everything that we're all interested in, sometime in the mid 90s or so. So this is kind of my journey. And then most recently, and this, of course, this journey took me to southern France, like many people watching, including yourself. I mean, you find a second home in the Languedoc and on the Cathar Trail. I've been there many, many times. And also following Magdalene into Egypt as well. This is a piece that's very important because, as we know, Jesus himself was trained in the mystery schools in Egypt, and there is evidence that Mary Magdalene was as well, especially concerning the anointing oils and the ascension oils, which we'll have a chance to talk about. And so we've been doing this research then for a long time, and then most recently we were in Egypt and now putting together new pieces of this remarkable puzzle.
So before we get to that, I wanted to ask you, what is your connection to Magdalene? Excuse me.
Well, that's a very good question. I'm a researcher who feels very much connected with the Magdalene. It's kind of funny. I have met numerous incarnations of Mary Magdalene. I believe that they're all sincere and all very true. I've met numerous incarnations of Yeshua or Jesus and John the Baptist. And it's a funny thing. What started happening, especially this goes back, must be just before the Dan Brown years. With the Magdalene Mysteries, you kind of have the pre-Dan Brown era with Sir Lawrence Gardner and Margaret Starbird really leading the way, and Elizabeth Van Buren, of course. They're the real forerunners of the sort of the Magdalene mysteries in our contemporary area. And then Dan Brown hits, and all of a sudden it's just a flood. And the strange role that I kept having was people wanted me to validate that they were Mary Magdalene or John the Baptist or Jesus. And I'm like, why is that? I mean, why are you coming to me to say, to lend authenticity to your experience? I mean, I gave everybody the same advice. And that was, it's about transcending the archetype. Yes, you could have been, you might have been, you were one of these historical figures. But the object is not to get stuck in that lifetime. The object is to take what you accumulated and did in that lifetime and transcend it in this lifetime and carry the work forward. So that maybe 2,000 years from now, people are talking about, your name as, the person who stepped up and advanced this story in a new way. And that, to me, that's the advice I always gave people, because that was the advice that was given to me when I started my quest as well. Don't get stuck or identify yourself as a particular person in history. Absorb that and move on.
Right, because what they do is they kind of hold on to the emotions, the story, and all of that, and then they just think that they are that in 2,000 years ago. But what they really should be doing, like you said, transcending it and making it new.
Exactly. I remember one case in particular. This person believed that he was Jesus and wanted me to give him validation. And my response to him was, well, what would, if you were the second coming, what would that do for you? What would that bring into your life that you presently don't have? What do you want out of this? And finally, his answer was, I just want peace of mind. And I'm like, well, okay, because he had come to Nashville from a long way away to visit me. And everywhere we went and had lunch someplace, and he's telling everybody, I am becoming. I am becoming. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I finally realized as the conversation progressed that this was something that Jesus must or might have said, I am becoming. And I said, instead of telling people you are becoming, just tell yourself that you have peace of mind, and be that peace, and then radiate that, and you will have accomplished your mission.
You're right. That's the other thing, that they copycat. They try to embody the words and everything else, but then they have no personality in themselves.
Right. It's so powerful and so profound. And I in no way denigrate this experience. I believe these people are having that experience. But as we're talking here, the important point is to bring it into our contemporary time and advance the story, not stay in it.
Yes, that's very powerful.
My 2 cents.
So what else could you tell me about your journey with the Magdalene Codes?
Okay, yeah. So as I mentioned before, not to bore you with a long history, I started in 1982, read Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Of course, that's a book that launched many people on this path. And what got me was this idea that there's this parallel mystery tradition, this original primitive Christianity that is different from traditional Christianity. And traditional Christianity, Orthodox Church, has done everything it can to wipe out that original story. So I'm instantly hooked. This is in the 80s. I'm continuing my research. Then it seemed to start to pick up steam in the 90s. Elizabeth Van Buren, who I mentioned a moment ago, she wrote a book called Refuge of the Apocalypse, which was about Rennes-le-Château and the Cathar mysteries, and kind of picked up where Holy Blood, Holy Grail left off, and pointed to the mysteries of Rennes-le-Château and the surrounding area and what might be there. And in particular, she made reference to an obscure Cathar prophecy about the Book of Love, this mysterious book said to have been transmitted to John the Divine or John the Beloved by Jesus, that if rediscovered would cause a wave of love to pour over the planet. So this is the early 90s that this is starting to impact me, and I'm realizing more and more that Magdalene is the key player here. I started to develop from this point forward, and my first visit to Rennes-le-Château must have been 1996, when I actually had an opportunity to meet Elizabeth Van Buren, and of course go to Rennes-le-Château, have the whole Henry Lincoln experience and so forth. And more the awakening is that Mary Magdalene is the ringleader of this movement. She's the wealthy financier. She's the one with tremendous knowledge. Yeshua, to me, I started to refer to him as her daredevil test pilot. Here, honey, we're working on this oil. I'm gonna anoint you with this oil. You're gonna dissolve into rainbow-colored light so that your body is the same as the angels, just like Enoch had this experience. Then you're gonna go through this portal or gateway, and then you're gonna be able to come back to us and tell us how to navigate in the celestial realms and in the afterlife. So let's go. Let's try this recipe. That's, with all due respect, I mean, that's kind of like how I started to view this, that Magdalene is the one that had that direct knowledge of these codes of how to transmute the body into light, because coming from that Essene background, that was their whole mission. They were living with the angels at Qumran and Carmel and elsewhere. John the Baptist, Jesus, Mother Mary, the Magdalene, all are involved in this movement to, one, bring these high celestial beings to earth, the angels; two, live with them; but three, most importantly, transform the earth into a planet of righteousness and love and connect us to a divine realm they referred to as the celestial city, the New Jerusalem, that's inhabited. It's inhabited by angels gathered in joyful assembly and just humans, righteous humans who are made perfect. And that was the whole key right there that opened up my investigation or research into the Magdalene Codes, was that word perfect. But what did they mean by that? That there are a different class of humans. They refer to them as perfect light humans that dwell in these celestial realms. And I wanted to know, well, who are these people? And how did they get there? And every time I'm looking into this, Magdalene is in the center of this, as if she's like a bridge. She's a connecting link between the earthly and the heavenly. And she has the tools, most notably the oil and the understanding of the Merkabah mysteries that we can talk about, that assist us in our ascension from celestial or earthly beings with biological or flesh and blood bodies into celestial beings with perfect light bodies.
Yes, it's so interesting because I don't know if you know, I'm writing a book called The Book of Mary.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a channel or what it is, but what I'm receiving is that Mary Magdalene is actually the heart. And in this process, she's connecting the lower chakras and the upper chakra. She is that bridge of the earth and the celestial. So she is that heart consciousness. And a lot of people actually believe that she is a consciousness. She is a stream of consciousness. But she actually had a body. She was not.
Totally agree. Right.
She lived here on earth, because some people believe that Yeshua and Mary didn't even live here on earth. So they believe that they're just streams of consciousness. I'm just wondering, what's your feeling on that?
Well, I would have an answer to that, in that it goes back to this definition of what is a perfect light human. You know, today, if you Google perfect body, you're going to get some, made up Beverly Hills plastic surgeon's version of what a perfect body looks like. And it's completely unattainable by most people. But to the ancients, the word perfect had a different meaning. It meant to be more whole, more holy, more complete and compassionate. But it also meant that you were in a different state of being that corresponds with what the Tibetans refer to as the great perfection. Those who have attained the great perfection have the ability to translate the mass of their body into energy or light, so that they can be all places at the same time, a stream of consciousness, in other words. And the perfect light body is equatable to the resurrection body or the glory body, the light body of Christianity. They're the same thing, in my opinion. So, for example, if we go to a slide here, if I can share a slide with the audience, I'm going to come over here, and I got that lined up, and I'm going to share screen. I'm going to come right here, and I'm going to share. Okay. Can you see this slide?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the moment of resurrection where you have Magdalene anointing Jesus's feet. You see her alabaster jar there in the lower left-hand corner?
Yes.
Okay, that contains her oil, her anointing oil. And then Jesus is now burst into rainbow-colored light. This tells us that he is no longer in his earthly flesh and blood body. He's now in a different state of being. He's in his resurrection body. This was the whole purpose, in my opinion, of the original Christian mysteries, is he is demonstrating how humans ascend, how they can trigger this latent capability within all of us to take our earthly bodies and transform them into our celestial light bodies. And this is the great promise of Christianity, is that we will all be like him at the time of the second coming, mirroring, as the Bible says, the mirror, or mirroring that of Christ, which means that at that time, we are going to no longer be in our earthly flesh and blood bodies. We are going to be in our perfect light bodies. And Corinthians says that this change will happen in the twinkling of an eye, in a flash, at the last trump, that some kind of a tone, wave, or reverberation, which is what the word trump means, will transform us. But that's only part of it. Sound is a key element in this transformation, but the other part of it, in my research, is this anointing oil. That Magdalene was the perfumer who made this oil. And when she anoints Jesus's body, it assists him in translating, dematerializing his flesh and blood body into his perfect light body, which corresponds with what you see in Tibetan Buddhism with the what they call the great perfection. Now, the Tibetans say that our body is designed to have its frequency accelerated so that it dissolves into 5-colored rainbow light, leaving behind only hair, toe, and fingernails, which have no nerves to be transmuted. This is the definition of perfection to the Tibetans and to the early Christians, including, I would say, Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And when we look at images like this one here, once again, Lucas Signorelli, the crucifixion, Mary Magdalene is clearly in charge here. She is in charge. And we see the skull symbolizing Golgotha. We don't see the alabaster jar. It should be present, but we see Jesus with a rainbow-colored sash on. That's a really good tip-off to me artistically that the artist, Signorelli, is trying to point us into the direction of the rainbow light body. And according to the earliest Christian teachings, 2nd century Gnostic Gospels, the Gospel of Mary, after Jesus attained his rainbow light body, his resurrection body, he reappeared to Mary Magdalene, the first person he appeared to, and gave her a flash of illumination that is the continuation of this incredible teaching that they initiated together on earth, but certainly continue now into the ascended or the celestial realm. So for me, this moment of resurrection, when he first appears to her in that garden, is that moment where she's saying, it worked. We're successful. We have successfully created this oil, this teaching that can dissolve the body into light and enable this profound ascension to occur.
Sorry, I'm feeling so much energy right now. It's like I'm feeling emotional, and it's like a very deep download for me.
Yeah, these images they're all charged. They're all charged. This one is one of my favorites. It happens to come from the Church of Mary Magdalene and Fivehead Magdalene in Dorset. Clare was a member of this church for a very long time. And when we first visited there together, I was just awestruck by this painting. We got Mary Magdalene with her traditional red hair. Jesus is in his light body form. In fact, in the detail of the painting, you can see that she's in the light with him. She's on this side. He's already gone into his light body form and is now manifested to her. And she is now receiving those codes, those light body codes that she will ultimately use in her own ascension as well. I mean, most people are not really that familiar, in my experience, with the traditions that say Mary Magdalene herself ascended, but she did.
Yes.
So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we can come back to some of these slides in a moment.
She actually ascended on my birthday.
Did she?
Yeah, July 22nd.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, great. Wow, that's your birthday.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow, very, very powerful day.
Yes, it is. But you know what I realize is that Jesus, Yeshua, he was to go up into the celestial, into the ethers, into the heavens, and where Mary Magdalene her role was to be on earth, to continue to where she was working with the earth, the oils, and she's also working with humanity from the earth plane, and he was working from this heavenly ethereal celestial plane.
And what I always am so fascinated by, and my friend Sir Lawrence Gardner really advanced my kind of thinking about this. It's been 04, 05. He puts his book out, The Magdalene Legacy. This is, again, just before the Dan Brown era when it all kind of exploded. But just the realization of what it must have been like, and I'm always trying to get at this, what was their real life like? I mean, the traditional church version, you watch the movies, they portray these people as just kind of simple idiots, really. Like they're just, oh, we're fishermen and we're carpenters and Mary Magdalene's a whore and da-da-da. And it's like they're so two-dimensional and fake.
Right.
And even today, the movies that are out, you have this great opportunity with all this research to really paint a more profound and truer picture of who they were and what their life was like. And that always fascinates me. Just what was it like being Mary Magdalene in the immediate aftermath of the crucifixion and resurrection,
Yes.
and being hunted by the Romans and on the run and still trying to fulfill this mission, and knowing that your beloved is just performed this all-time great service for humanity, and yet nobody seems to know about it.
Yes. In my book, I write that Mary Magdalene, she goes to see Caesar, and she says, and she shows him an egg, and
Right.
egg,
Love that story.
and
Yeah.
she says, "Behold, Christ is risen."
Right.
And the egg turns red before his eyes, and he was just, and she had that power. She had that power to change the egg's color, and he was, who is this woman?
I know it. I know. And you have to remember, and this is something that's very interesting to me, is that really the Jesus and Mary Magdalene moment probably began 4 or 5 centuries before, where there had been this movement towards ascension, because before this, the ruling dictators, the emperors and empire builders were like, this ascension nonsense, forget about it. That's not happening. If God wanted you to ascend, he'd send you an invitation. And so just sit down, shut up, and don't even think about that you're worthy of being able to pursue these mysteries. But there were all these mystics who remembered the original old-time religions, which were centered on ascension and our connection with the heavenly hosts, celestial beings, star beings. And so the Essene movement, out of which Jesus and Mary Magdalene emerged, were very much part of a timeline where we've been working on this for several centuries, and it represented almost a crescendo. And then when it was fully revealed, the response was horrific. Nero and Vespasian's just coming into Jerusalem 30 years after the resurrection and just completely wiping out the Essenes and any reference to this nonsense about people turning themselves into light beings and living with angels and opening portals and all of this. What are you talking about? A celestial city, an empire greater than Rome? There is no empire greater than Rome. Whack, you're done. And so for her to go and confront Tiberius, I mean, come on, you're talking about, someone going and standing before Hitler and that kind of power. That's what Rome represented, and she's like standing in the face of it.
Yeah, she was fearless. She really was, and she did it time and time again, facing Pontius Pilate. Also, people don't know that she also did that, and she's constantly facing all kinds of criticisms from men, where even Peter was constantly telling her, like, "Who are you?"
I know. They're so advanced. They're so advanced for their time. And because they're obviously high celestial beings.
Yes.
And super well educated, initiates of the mystery schools of Egypt and Iran, Iraq, even into the Orient, into Tibet, Mongolia. They were all over the place. They were incredibly wealthy, and they were super travelers.
Yes, and actually, speaking of that, people question all the time, how do these people travel all over the place in that time? There was no airplanes. How are they traveling all over the place? What's your answer to that?
Well, the mundane answer is they had ocean-going vessels. Joseph of Arimathea, who was a financier of this movement, was one of the wealthiest men alive at the time. He was the Bill Gates of his time. And he had boats that were going back and forth to England, up to Glastonbury, where the first Christian church was established, and you had the whole Druid Center up there. They were fully capable of having ocean-going vessels. But that's the mundane answer. The other answer is that we're dealing with avatars. We're dealing with people that are following the path of perfection. And in the Hindus, they talk about the 8 great perfections, which include teleportation, invisibility, bilocation, the ability to convert the mass of their body into energy and travel anywhere they want and then pop back into their physical body. That's who these people were.
That's right.
And their hybrid children would have had the same capability. So of course they're going to be hunted too.
So what I was saying was, my feeling was that after the resurrection of Yeshua, I also feel like Mary Magdalene was going through a resurrection herself.
Sure.
And that she and he were able to do things. Well, obviously he was in his light body, and she on the earth plane was able to do things on a whole nother level.
Absolutely. I mean, why not? Because again, we are dealing with these super advanced metaphysical beings, right? With super advanced capabilities. And if he, I mean, even he for a time when before the resurrection is kind of in that intermediate phase because he's already in that process. And then afterward, he comes to her and brings in that, let's just call it higher frequency, those codes, that teaching. So now she is embodying those. So she's walking around in between worlds too,
Yes.
right? Because she knows she's ultimately going to follow that path as well. And so, yeah, that's a very interesting point to just kind of contemplate again. What must it have been like to be walking around in this world with half of yourself in that other world too?
She did have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. She did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was difficult for her to operate as a mother and then also as a teacher. And it was difficult for her to put things into words sometimes because she also was losing the sense of being here on earth.
Right. And that's why, I mean, I'm a follower of that she went to southern France and lived in the caves, right? Because she couldn't handle
That's right.
being in the mundane world any longer. Had to be in this place where she can, one, work on her own ascension, but two, be protected as well.
Right. So I want to talk more about these findings of the oil. So what do you think this magic oil was?
Yeah, that's the ultimate question. I can say what I think it was not. And that's what the Bible says it was, which is spikenard.
Right.
And what got me thinking a little differently about this is I was actually headed to southern France in 04, 05, something like this, and on a Magdalene tour. And I was flying through Chicago, and I happened to pick up an article about the ancient Iraqi pharmacopoeias. And for a long time, archaeologists have been sure that the ancient Iraqis, the Sumerians, knew nothing really about pharmacology because their remedies for certain maladies could be like pig poop or dog poop or these strange, things that have no effect whatsoever. So the traditional scholars would say, see, they didn't know anything about what they're talking about here. And then this one clever scholar did some digging and found out, oh, here's the code book that says dog poop equals this herb, pig poop equals this herb. And so they had this extrovert or kind of exoteric explanation, and then they had the esoteric meaning behind the exoteric. So when people say, oh yeah, Mary Magdalene, her anointing oil for Jesus was spikenard, I'm thinking, well, okay, that's possible, but isn't it also possible that it's something else? And if it's not spikenard, then what was it? And first of all, I think we have to go back to the Essene story of Enoch. The Essenes were, of course, these great mystic Jewish masters. They weren't all Jewish. They had members of their order that came from many different traditions, including members from India. And they gathered first together in Alexandria, Egypt. Then they isolated themselves in Qumran and Carmel and elsewhere. And they started writing these stories. And their superhero, they pulled from the Old Testament, from the book of Genesis. His name was Enoch. All the Old Testament says is that Enoch walked with God. He ascended. He was the first to walk with God. He was a pre-flood sage who walked with God. Well, the Essenes got a hold of Enoch and turned him into a superhero. And they started, and it's about 150 BC. They start writing stories about Enoch's translation and how he was like an ordinary guy, like us, like the Essenes, who were researchers deep into this lore, deep into this process of ascension. And suddenly it's like the light bulb goes off and the archangel Michael comes and visits him. And Michael takes Enoch up to the heavenly realms. And en route, he anoints him with an oil that dissolves Enoch's body into light rainbow colored light,
Mm.
so that now his body is the same as the angels. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, okay, this is the oil. This oil turns us into our rainbow light body. This is what the Essenes are saying. And then, of course, in the story, Enoch goes up to the heavenly realms. Long story short, he becomes an angel. He becomes the archangel Metatron, as a matter of fact, according to the Essenes.
Was he ever really fully human?
Enoch? I think so. I mean, because this is what they're talking about, is this potential that all of us have hardwired into us to dissolve our body into light. And one of the critical components is sound, but it's also an oil that we got to get our hands on, whether it's delivered from an otherworldly oil from the Archangel Michael. You know, this is a big part of the Jewish mystic lore, is that when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, they left a tree there. And that Seth, later Adam and Eve's son Seth, was sent back to the Garden of Eden to get the seeds from that tree to make an oil from this tree, an oil that would be used in the end times to turn humans into light. And of course, the Essenes thought they were living in those end times. So that was a very important story. And so this oil keeps coming up over and over again. It's in the Egyptian tradition, it's in other traditions. And the question is, what is it? And
you mentioned the tree of life,
and
there's some feeling, there's a part of me that feels like Mary Magdalene is representative of the tree of life. And somehow I feel like she actually carries the oil within herself.
Yeah, we all do. We all do. Because, you know, in the late 2000s, early 2000s to 2010 or so, in my presentations about this, I was very influenced by the placebo effect. And my belief was, you know, if Mary Magdalene is standing in front of you and says, darling, this oil I've got right here, I'm gonna put it on your third eye and you're gonna start to dissolve into light. You do it. You believe her. And you would have been intentionally prepared for that moment. And what if there is no oil at all? What if it's just a placebo? That works with the idea that, in fact, what she's helping us to awaken to is that, in fact, our pineal gland is a manufacturing plant of sacred oils. And that if we can release the secretions that contain the secrets of transmuting our bodies into light, then we're performing the ultimate alchemy. So I believe that there was an oil, but at the same time, I'm thinking it really doesn't matter what the oil was. It's just, it was her power, her presence, and their belief in her that helped to kickstart this.
Yes, exactly. So
just a thought.
Now, we're not straying off of the Mary Magdalene because I feel like she's always connected to it. But you were in Egypt recently and you found that this, basically these codes in which the Ankh is dripping some sort of fluid. And
yes.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, when you go to Egypt, I'm wondering, I see all these images on the walls where maybe a pharaoh is holding an ankh up to a god's nostril, or the other way around often. And I'm wondering, why are they inhaling the key of life? I mean, the key of life, or the ankh, is thought to be a ketone or vibration. And then I finally understood that the reason why they're inhaling it is because it's that key of life is tipped with an oil. And one of the key revelations of that for me came with my research into the sun, of all things. And the reason why it fits is because there's the Essenes were highly influenced by the revolution of religion of light of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. 1400 years before the time of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, they are Christ-Magdalene archetypes, where Akhenaten is talking about the one God, the religion of light. Nefertiti is shown in depictions with an alabaster jar in her hand that she's holding up to the Aton, which is symbolized by a disc radiating rays. People say that's the sun. But Akhenaten himself said, no, the Atan is the light that illuminates our sun. One big giant consciousness leap back, right? And so here's Nefertiti charging whatever is in that alabaster jar and this light that illuminates the sun that is stepped down through our sun. And so I started researching the sun as I'm following their path. First of all, you find out our sun is a musical instrument. According to the Stanford Solar Observatory at Stanford University, it's like a giant pipe organ. It plays 1,000,000 notes simultaneously. Think about that.
Yes, yes.
So maybe Akhenaten knew one key or note that could transform us. The second thing is they now believe that the cores of stars like our sun produce what they call a perfect oil. A perfect oil that can be used to open portals between stars. And I'm thinking, wow, what if, there is perhaps some oil that comes down with the key or tone that opens the portals in our consciousness that then enables us to turn our body into a portal so that we can go through the portal of the sun. That's where my thinking developed on that.
The Christos is an oil.
It's thought of, yeah, it is an oil. Yeah, the chrism, Christos, yes, absolutely.
Which drips from your pineal gland.
Sure. And
so it's always referring back to this oil.
Yes. Yes.
So if it's within us or without us, it's always, that's the symbol of ascension.
Yes. Yeah. And I believe it's made from within us. I think there could be an oil out here that does the same thing. Of course, the Egyptians, I'm always investigating the blue lotus oil when I'm in Egypt, looking for more examples of that. The famous scene of Tutankhamun and his wife Ankhesenamun and their mystic marriage ceremony on his throne shows him being anointed by Ankhesenamun with the blue lotus oil, with the light of the Atan, baptizing both of them at the same time. And it's clearly the blue lotus oil that is being used as the source of the anointing oil. And the blue lotus, of course, has all kinds of mystical connections in ancient Egypt. They used it as a narcotic. They used it to open up mystical centers. They used it for healing. It had all kinds of uses that we're still not even fully understanding of today.
And so how is this connected to the Merkabah mysteries?
Well, the Merkabah is the light chariot of the mysteries. It's our ascension vehicle. It's symbolized by a cloud. Like if you'll see a bodhisattva riding on a cloud, that cloud symbolizes the Merkabah vehicle, our throne chariot or our celestial chariot, which is a state of consciousness, and it's a state of being. And what the Essenes are absolutely affirmative of is that there was an oil involved in the development of our Merkabah throne chariot, our celestial chariot, which I equate it with the light body, with the rainbow light body. I believe that they're ultimately the same thing. And this is based on my research in Egypt, where you will see like Osiris and Isis on their feathered ascension thrones. That's the Merkabah throne chariot. Then the Essenes developed their whole mysticism based on this idea that we can all develop this celestial throne chariot and ascend to the stars and take our place in the celestial city.
Now, I haven't really noticed any of the Merkabah symbolism in any of the paintings. So I wonder how come that wasn't included?
What do you mean by Merkabah symbolism?
Our ancient paintings, from the Renaissance or from
right, like,
because I know you're very educated on all these different clues in the paintings.
Yeah, what are you referring to as Merkabah symbolism?
So just the Merkabah itself, because the Merkabah is like it's like a two diamonds. And
okay. That is Drunvalo Melchizedek's full interpretation of that.
Can you tell us what you think it is?
The Ark of the Covenant is the original throne chariot, and there is no reference anywhere in the Essene teachings about the Merkabah to a star tetrahedron, all of that. That is Drumbelow Melchizedek and only Drumbelow Melchizedek. That's not to say that he's right or wrong. It's just to say that that is not the same thing as what the Essenes referred to as the Merkabah in their original Merkabah teachings.
Right.
The Merkabah is the light body. It is the throne chariot, the celestial chariot, and it is symbolized by a cloud or by a throne with a footstool. When very often in ascension scenes where Jesus is ascending, I don't have one handy here. I wish I did. But going back to the 4th century in Egypt, for example, in the Coptic Christian, the earliest Christian depictions of the Ascension, Jesus is sitting on a throne with his feet on a footstool. That's the symbolism of the Merkabah. Behind him are concentric rings that symbolize sound and vibration, but also a portal. And in these images, we see him from the face on, but actually he's going vertical in these scenes, in this pillar. He's ascending on this pillar. And that Merkabah throne chariot was the Ark of the Covenant, which contained several tools and implements, including the jar of anointing oil that was a requirement to ascending on the Merkabah or throne chariot. So it's a little bit of a difference. I don't know where Drumbelow got his symbolism from, but again, it does not originate with the original Essene mysteries. And so when you know that the Merkabah is actually the throne chariot, it's all over the place. Mary is sitting on the throne with Jesus on her lap. Isis her name means the throne. And this is what they're talking about, is that this experience is like being in your mother's lap. It's the most loving experience you could ever imagine happening, of this oneness with the universe. And that's why it's, again, symbolized in part by the throne, and it originates with Isis and Osiris.
Right, because a lot of people mock these depictions where, the God is sitting on a throne.
Right. They don't know what that is.
Right.
That is their Merkabah throne. And they're extraordinary. It's a huge but just a challenge that I have in communicating with people and talking about this, because their understanding is incomplete, like about the Ark of the Covenant and how it ties in with the Merkabah mysteries. But just briefly, and this is part of what Jesus and Mary Magdalene were about, was taking these mysteries out of the isolation of the temple and giving them to everybody.
Right.
And what they wanted to do is to make the entire planet like the Temple of Solomon. And what would happen, just briefly, is that the high priest, or in some cases a priestess as well, would put on a special set of garments that included the crown of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the belt of truth, the sandals of peace, the robe of glory. And they would do this in anticipation of crossing over the veil that separated the holy place from the most holy place of the Temple of Solomon. In the most holy place was the Ark Throne. And what would happen is that the high priest would then sit on the Ark Throne and be transported into the celestial realms, like it's some kind of teleportation device or dematerialization device.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Then they would cross back through the veil, go out amongst the people at the temple, and radiate light. Now, academics argue about this, and trust me, the popular literature needs a real infusion from the academics, because they know exactly what the Ark of the Covenant is, that it is, in fact, the Merkabah throne, and that it is some kind of a celestial transportation vehicle. There's no question about that at the academic level. And what I've been trying to do these past 5 or 10 years in my research on the Essenes is access all this academic material and bring it down to the popular level, because it hasn't happened yet. But my point is that the academics argue, when that high priest came back down out of heaven alive and radiated light, is that a literal experience or metaphorical? Most of them want to say it's metaphorical. They radiated light. They acquired light or wisdom, and they shed that light to the people. And I'm thinking, no, this is a literal experience. And why this is important for us to understand is because this is the whole foundation of the Essenes themselves. They are named after this breastplate of righteousness, which was called the Ascend. And if you have two choices here, and this is what Jesus and Magdalene were working on, is like, only a select few people can have this experience in the old time version, but the new time version is that everybody can have this experience. Now, the question you're confronted with is, do you believe that this crown of salvation, breastplate of righteousness, belt of truth, and sandals of peace are actual physical accoutrements, like you could go down to Nordstrom and get the latest Armani version of it? Or does it make more sense that these are symbols? That the crown of salvation is our activated crown. The breastplate of righteousness is our activated heart. The belt of truth is what it says it is. You're speaking truth and you're walking in peace. They're talking about putting on psycho-spiritual attributes that enable you to walk between the worlds. And that completely changes everything, because now it's not just some guy wearing some shiny garment full of jewels and everything. This is actually a transformation of the human race, where everyone now becomes like a high priest and has access to the divine realms.
Well, that's what Mary Magdalene and Yeshua's goal was for that.
Exactly. And that's why we got to really get back to a more complete understanding of what was going on. And so what had happened in their time is that the Temple of Solomon had been desecrated by the priests that came in, and they're like, where's our original old-time religion, our old-time ascension teachings? And that's what they're trying to get back to. And they were living with angels, and the angels were teaching humans how to turn themselves into angels. So you're talking about a massive enlightenment revolution that they were sparking.
And I think this time is coming back.
Yeah. I mean, for the first time in, almost 2,000 years, we're able to put this story back together.
Yeah.
Because the Dead Sea Scrolls were lost until 1947, and they weren't even published for the public until 1996. So it's only been about 20 years that we've really had access to a lot of this information. And it's concurrent with this totally transformative movement beginning in 2000, gaining steam in 2012. And now we're full frontal with it, as that we've got to reclaim these mysteries as the antidote to what's happening in our world with technology, transhumanism, and all of that story.
Right. I mean, the technology that we're using right now is so antiquated to what the divine technology, that's really we have access to.
It is, but what a lot of people don't realize is the history of this technology, that it goes back to, again, this Essene revolution. The Essenes were all about humans were originally light beings. We were originally in light being form, but then after the fall, we're given these flesh and blood bodies. And in their opinion, all of human existence was about how do we drop these physical bodies and get back into our original divine nature. And what happened was, historically, not to get into a long lecture about this, but around the 10th century, an invention came along that started to accelerate our use of technology. And that invention, believe it or not, was a plow that could be pulled by multiple oxen. Because the monks believed that was a gift from God. Because if we can do our work in half the time, then we can get back to our real work project, which is reclaiming our original divine nature as light beings. So they've developed this thought stream that God has given us this technology so we can accelerate our quest for perfection. Eyeglasses followed on, where this idea came along, wait, we can augment our physical body with technology and perfect ourselves. And that's what transhumanism is an answer or a reflection of our quest to perfect ourselves. It's kind of gone off the rails. In my opinion, but it is a reflection of this original quest. And this is the conversation at the Essene lunch table. How do we do this? How do we accelerate our perfection? And Jesus and Mary Magdalene come along and say, well, we've got the tools. And we're going to demonstrate this for you, how this can happen for all of us.
What you're alluding to is that the internet and the computer and all these things are actually tools so that we can actually access more information, but also have more time to have these awakenings, if you will.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm this much okay with the technology, and I've been out harping against this for 10 years or more. I first started writing about it in 2002, and now it's right in front of us. Back then, people thought I was crazy. What do you mean humans are going to merge with machines? You're nuts. And back then, we thought it would be around 2035, not 2020.
Right.
But this is the fine line that we're all working, is that we have this wonderful opportunity to go out and gather all this information and utilize it. But at the same time, we recognize we're under a microscope. We're totally transparent. Everything you do online is recorded, tracked, and surveilled. So we're in a total totalitarian state. Is this totalitarian state motivated by the ascension of the human species? No, it's motivated by the control of the human species. How do they intend to control us? By turning us into machines.
Yes.
By linking us with this Internet of Things, where we'll be in a narrow band of frequency. This is already happening in China, and Facebook operates on this premise too, with the social credit system, that if they decide they don't want you talking about ascension or developing these spiritual capabilities, they're going to make an island out of you.
Yeah.
And it's be difficult for you to get a mortgage, get a job, blah, 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 like you would care about that if you're really on the path of ascension. But we do have to live in this world. And this is what we're confronted with, is this quest for immortality. This is what they're selling to us. Oh, wow, if you could live 300 more years, Val, just imagine how much knowledge you could accumulate. Wow, you might decide you want to stick around for another 5,000 years. But our quest isn't for immortality, mummification on the earth plane. Our quest is for ascension.
Right. It's funny because I feel like many people like us always wanted to leave this earth earlier. But there's a role here. There's a role here. You have a role, I have a role. We have big roles to help humanity move forward.
Absolutely. It's the same as, again, what they were talking about at the Essene lunch table. How do we turn Earth into a planet of righteous beings? How do we get ourselves back to our original divine nature and live from that place? That's what it's about. And that's so to want to leave without helping to fulfill that is not the fulfillment of their original mission, which I think is ongoing.
So do you feel that Mary Magdalene's energy is current right now? Like she's full on here onto the planet?
I do. And again, having personally observed it and sort of participated in it, I mean, in the early 90s, not a lot of conversation about it. And I think really Holy Blood, Holy Grail really launched it. And that's 1982. And it took a little while for like Margaret Starbird, who lived here in Nashville. She went to Vanderbilt University Divinity School, became a nun, and read Holy Blood, Holy Grail that said Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married, and they were, had this high advanced spirituality, and they left these teachings in this remote village in southern France, and we could go reacquire this, and da, da, da. She was really upset. She was angry when she read that. And she set about proving that Holy Blood, Holy Grail was false, and ended up proving it was correct. And that's her book, The Woman with the Alabaster Jar, which I think maybe came out around 1990 or so. So it took about 8 years, 10 years, and Sir Lawrence Gardner is also on that same wavelength at that time. And these are some of the really inspiring authors that helped to launch this revolution. And then came Dan Brown, which is totally derived from Holy Blood, Holy Grail, totally derived from The Woman with the Alabaster Jar. And now all of a sudden he sells 85, 90, 100 million copies of this book. It becomes a global sensation. And behind it all is the Magdalene. That's what it is at the core of it. And so it became fully present around 06, 05, 06. And then people sort of got sick of it. We got Dan Browned out a little bit because it was just everywhere all of a sudden. And now, as I'm observing it, this is almost 40 years later, as we're coming up on 2020, that she's even picking up greater steam now. There's a major interest in the Magdalene story and trying to get at that original truth. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There is not just a resurgence, but it's a motivating factor in what is happening today, and identifying with that energy is super important, both for men and women.
So how is it affecting you personally, as well as your wife? Because I know you're both on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we walk the path, following in the footsteps of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and not in a ego way, but recognizing very clearly that we are devoted to following that path. This is why we do tours to southern France. This is why we go to Egypt. This is why we go to England and Italy. We're not going to these places for any other reason than this is where the Holy Family was. Yes. And we want to be in those places. We want to be face to face with any of their relics, any of the places that they were, the energy deposits they left behind, because that is our ultimate quest, is to follow them in the literal sense on the path that they laid out for us.
Have you found any relics that connect to that?
We have, and Claire will, I'm sure, come back and talk with you at some point about some of our latest findings, which are just mind-blowing. And we're double checking on a couple of things just to be sure. It's surprising the number of those types of relics that are out there that are from that era that have survived. And also, what's even more important to me is the accessibility that we have to the teachings and the understanding of those teachings. Like, for example, Claire and we do workshops on the art of living ascension. We're very focused on our Gaia TV program, Arcanum, about the power of sacred art. And this is something that came out of the Essene era and was very important to the early disciples of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, is the use of sacred art as a way of transmitting their vibration. Yeah. The books were important, but the art was even more important. So we follow this path of trying to accumulate these examples of art, especially the art of transfiguration, where Jesus morphs into light, and the understanding that from the icon makers who made those images originally, that image of Jesus transfiguring was just as good as Jesus standing in front of you.
Absolutely.
So,
as you were talking to me about the Mary Magdalene and using the oil for resurrection, and the art was in front of me, but your voice, the art, everything was, I was being activated into that space and time.
It's so powerful. It really is. It's so powerful. And we've collected so many images, and we keep looking and looking, because we want people to have just that experience that you're describing there, to get that transmission and be able then to embody it and take it forward.
So what's the next step with all of this information? What do you think you're going, is it another book? What is it? What do you think is next?
Yeah, I'm in the process of finishing my book about the Essenes. I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of academic discussion about the Essenes that's incredibly mystical, that has not made its way down to the popular level yet. So living here in Nashville, I have access to the Vanderbilt University Divinity Library, which has all of this material at my fingertips, 5 minutes away. So I've been accessing that and trying to put together this piece of what were they doing? What were the Essenes really all about? And how can we follow that trail? And for me, it is all about the perfection of the light body. The Essenes use that word almost like a golden needle, calling themselves of the children of perfect light humans. This is the whole kind of core of the Essene movement or mission, was to recover these secrets and to utilize them to turn themselves into angels. So I'm working on that. Claire and I are working on our book about sacred art as well, which we hope to have completed very soon. It's a huge project, very ambitious project, to bring all that, first to find it,
yes,
and then to put it all together. But that's we hope that'll be our contribution really to all these mysteries is to bring this peace and put it on the table.
Yes. So I wonder do you feel like you're being ushered into this work? Do you feel like you're being, like Mary Magdalene's behind you in a way? Um,
I could say yes, but I don't have any one or two examples of times where I was thinking about something and I've heard a voice or anything like that. I feel very connected and always have. I mean, ever since, again, 1982, reading Holy Blood, Holy Grail when I was 19 years old. It's like, wow, this is it. And here I am, I'm now 56 years old, still working on the same questions and following the same path and with the same excitement.
right.
So that's my testimonial.
But you and Clare, I feel, are both very intuitive, psychic. And so it's not just coming from this, this mental state of,
Right.
it's more of like this intuition. And of course, I really feel like things kind of fall in your lap.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. I mean, Clare is Clare everything, clairaudient, clairsentient, has all of the Clare qualities.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm still, I'm totally open, but in my job, the service that I provide is to access all of this material and then put it in a package so you can then go follow it up. So I'm always wanting to have a trail, like E.T. following the Reese's Pieces. I want to be able to have people see, here are the pieces, and you can go read it for yourself and maybe come to the same conclusion or perhaps a different one. So we're kind of that blend of the right brain and left brain in that way, yeah. Masculine and feminine.
It's a good combination.
Yeah, yeah. And, there are intuitive hits, but at the same time, by going out and seeking it, I think you put yourself in the position to be in the right place at the right time, and the certain book or the piece of information falls into place. So, it's a little bit of both, that coming from above as well as reaching up to the above.
But you only step into the next place by intuition. So, for example, working on this book with the Essenes.
Yeah.
Where is that coming from?
Well, part of it is reading material about the Essenes and going, that's not right. That's not how it was. And I don't know, not saying I have past life memories, but I feel like I have an intuition about, first of all, how just profoundly mystical they were. And as I mentioned earlier, it always drives me crazy when I read about these two-dimensional versions of these people as simpletons, right? Far, far from it. These are some of the greatest initiates of all time. And when you start from that premise, the sky is the limit in terms of what they were capable of doing and the interaction that they were having. So that's what I'm trying to follow up on. And the other thing that separates me from sort of the academics, if you will, the PhD dissertations that I read and the academic works, the journals, is that I take the Essene texts as an invitation to join them. And the academics say, oh, no, these are just literary works, and our analysis is just purely literary criticism. We don't take this personally at all. Mm. And that's a big difference, because when you answer the call and start to say, wait a minute, I want to be with them. Now you're forced to change your life. Now you're it's telling you and prompting you to make different choices in order to follow them. And it makes it a big difference in approach.
Do you feel like you were one of them?
I would say, yeah. I feel like I was there. I don't know who I was or what exactly my role was, but I do believe I was a participant in some form or fashion, maybe an observer. I have that sense. I'm still sort of partly an observer and partly a participant, and wanting to kind of maybe blend both worlds just a little bit. But there is a tremendous sense of reverence for them and understanding of who I think they actually were as people.
So in your experience, have you felt any connections to that reincarnations or any of that? Because I know
No, I'm really,
you started with that. It's now
no,
we're
I mean, people ask me that all the time, and I just, I haven't really explored that path. I mean, it's important to a lot of people, but to me, it's just not part of my what I think about. It's like who was I in this past life? I mean, I have people give me their impressions,
Mhm.
and I accept it and I think about it, and sometimes I'm really honored by it, and other times I'm just like, well, okay, but I'm gonna live. I'm gonna be William Henry. I'm gonna live in this life and um, go forward. And it could be that I'm missing out uh, by not having all the pieces, but it also helps me to kind of focus on who I am.
But I also feel like it also it's part of your own mystery that you're really focused on what's happening with all of this that you're discovering. And so to go within yourself, that's a whole nother mystery. And you it would take way too much time
Yes,
away from other things.
right. Yeah, that's true. No, that's true. I mean, it's hard to walk both of those paths at the same time. Some people do it beautifully, but I'm not geared that way.
Well, thank you so much for all your work. You and Claire do an amazing job. I love you guys on Gaia. I love you on history. It's funny. The first time I saw you guys on Gaia, I was watching both of you, and I'm like, and I was receiving these downloads, and I said, "Oh, they're my brothers and sisters."
That's so cool. I know. And you really connected with Claire when you met her at the Alien Con. That was awesome.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. I'm so proud of both of you.
Oh, well, thank you. You too. Likewise. You do wonderful work, and we're all, putting it together.
We're all
And
putting it together.
yeah,
So what's next? Do you have any retreats coming up, or what's going on?
yeah, we're going back to southern France and Lourdes and Montserrat in September. We've got England in September, where we follow the Holy Family to Glastonbury and follow the Grail Trail, if you will, and then back to Egypt in 2020. So go to my website, williamhenry.net, for details about all of those tours and all the other things that we're doing.
Yeah, you also have art on the website and other things as
Yeah.
well.
And I've also got a new Gaia show coming out, I believe in May of 2019, called Ascension Keepers, which is a timeline. A lot of people that are involved in the ascension kind of concept today are not as familiar with the ancient predecessors and how this has been ramping up. And so I went back and started from the beginning, and then move into the Essenes, the Gnostics, and the Cathars.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll be out in May.
Yeah, it sounds juicy. I'm sure people will tune in for sure.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And it gives us a profound sense of honor to be involved in this, and the responsibility that we have for carrying this forward. Because if we don't do it, no one else is going to do it.
Well, this is the time, the
Yes.
Aquarian age, the time to really move into this, enlightened way of being.
Yeah, it's incredible. We're so fortunate to be here. And if you're not excited about what's happening in our world, it's time to get with it, because
Yeah,
it's just mind blowing.
it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Val, and keep
And
up the great work.
likewise, and let's continue the conversation.
Look forward to it very much.
And
Thank you.
I hope to have a conversation with Claire as well.
Definitely, for sure.